Almost half of all trips to work or school in Copenhagen happen by bike. Not at the gym, not on a treadmill, just getting from one place to another. And here's the detail that actually matters for this video. That number barely changes with age. A Danish woman in her 20s and a Danish woman past 40 are, statistically, moving through their day in almost the same way. No dramatic diet, no supplement, no willpower speech. Just a system where staying in motion was never something you had to remember to schedule. Today, I'm showing you exactly what that system looks like and why it works so differently from anything sold to women after 40 here. Let's get straight to the actual answer, because I know that's what you clicked for. The reason so many Nordic women seem to hold onto their energy and vitality well past 40 isn't a diet. And it isn't some genetic advantage either. It's that movement in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway was never separated from daily life in the first place. It's not exercise you have to motivate yourself into. It's simply how you get to work, how you get groceries home, how you see a friend. When movement is built into the architecture of a day instead of bolted onto it as a separate task requiring willpower, it survives every single life stage, including the ones where motivation naturally dips. Before I go further, I want to be transparent about what this video is. What follows is built from documented cultural research and real movement statistics from Denmark, filtered through my own professional observations of Nordic daily life. My interpretation of it, meant to inform and inspire, not medical advice. I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist, and nothing here should replace guidance from your own physician. This is offered for education and entertainment, translating a real cultural pattern into something you can actually borrow. I'm Freya Holm. I grew up in a small fishing town on the Danish coast, daughter of a teacher and a fisherman, in a home where staying active was never framed as a project. It was just how you got anywhere. I trained as an interior designer in Copenhagen and spent 8 years organizing homes for urban families, watching the same rhythm show up in household after household, regardless of the woman's age. Mornings that already included motion before the day officially started, errands that doubled as fresh air, evenings that included a walk instead of a plan to eventually start walking. What I noticed wasn't more discipline. It was less friction. Here's the specific angle I want you to sit with for the rest of this video. In most of the world, staying active after 40 gets reframed as a battle, something you now have to fight for, schedule around, push yourself into, because life apparently slows down by default. In Denmark, there's very little of that battle to begin with, because the movement was never optional or separate from the day. There's nothing to restart, because it never fully stopped. That's the entire difference hiding behind this whole topic, and it has nothing to do with the restriction of any kind. Stick with me, because a little further in, I'm going to walk you through the specific daily habit that does the most quiet work here. Something almost nobody frames as exercise, because it doesn't look like a workout at all, which is exactly why it survives decades without anyone burning out on it. And later, I'll get into the part of this that's genuinely about energy and mood, not appearance, the piece almost nobody talks about, because it's less photogenic than any before and after story. but it's the part that actually explains why women in this system don't describe themselves as constantly running on empty the way it's so common to hear elsewhere. If this reframe already feels different from what you expected, go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you're new here. This channel exists to hand you the real systems behind Nordic living, not another rule to follow. And it genuinely helps to have you here for the rest of it. Let's start with the habit that does the most work, quietly, without ever asking for motivation in the first place. I know how exhausting it is to hear, just move more, after you've already tried the gym membership that sat unused after March, the fitness app you deleted after 2 weeks, the version of yourself from January that never quite made it to February. If that's your history, I'm not here to add another thing to that pile of attempts. I want to show you something different, because the Nordic version of this isn't another program to start and eventually abandon. Here's the habit that does the quiet work, and it's almost embarrassingly unglamorous. Attaching movement to something you were already doing anyway, not a workout block carved out of an already exhausting day. The bike instead of the car for the pharmacy run. The walk instead of the rideshare to a friend's apartment 15 minutes away. In Danish public health language, there's actually a term for this, Hvardagsmotion, which translates roughly to everyday movement. And it's treated as genuinely different from exercise on purpose. Exercise is something you have to find willpower for. Hvardagsmotion is something that just happens because it's stitched into an errand you were doing regardless. I think this is the part that's easy to skip past. So let me say it plainly. The reason this survives past 40, past 50, past every dip in motivation life throws at you, is that it was never dependent on motivation in the first place. You don't need to feel inspired to pick up milk. The movement rides along with a task you were doing anyway, invisible, requiring zero extra willpower on the hard days. That's the entire mechanism. Not more discipline, less dependence on discipline at all. I want to be honest about the excuse that usually comes up here, because I've heard it in almost every home I've ever worked in. I don't have the infrastructure for that. I don't live somewhere walkable. I don't have safe bike lanes. My errands aren't 15 minutes away. That's a completely fair and real barrier, and I'm not going to pretend everyone's city was built like Copenhagen's. But the underlying shift doesn't actually require a bike lane. It requires attaching movement to something you already do, in whatever form your life allows. Parking further away on purpose. Taking one flight of stairs instead of the elevator on the days your body can handle it. Walking the call with a friend instead of sitting through it. Small, unglamorous, attached to something already happening. The shift isn't start exercising. It's stop separating movement from your actual day. Now, here's the part I think matters even more than any of this, and it's the one almost nobody frames correctly. The reason Nordic women don't describe themselves as constantly running on empty by their 40s has less to do with movement itself and more to do with what that movement is quietly doing for mood and energy day after day. Movement outdoors, in daylight, even briefly, does something for energy and mental clarity that has nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with how a day actually feels from the inside. This is the piece that gets left out of almost every version of this conversation sold to women after 40 because it's not photogenic. Nobody posts a before and after of "I felt less foggy this week." But it's the actual thing driving the difference you're noticing when you watch women in this culture move through their 40s and 50s without collapsing into exhaustion the way it's become almost expected to elsewhere. I also don't want to romanticize this into something it isn't. Nordic women get tired. They have hard weeks, hard years, days where the bike stays in the shed and the walk doesn't happen. This isn't a system of relentless discipline hiding behind a cozy word. It's just a much lower bar to clear on the days that are hard, because the baseline habit was never a big production to begin with. There's very little to fall out of, because it was never dramatic enough to fall out of in the first place. If you've spent years feeling like your energy has quietly slipped away from you since your 20s, and every fix you've tried required a burst of motivation you didn't have to spare, I want you to hear this clearly. That's not a personal failure. That's what happens when the only movement available to you requires willpower. You're already spending everywhere else in your life. The system, not your discipline, is usually the actual problem. We're getting close to putting this all together now. The small daily attachment habit, the mood piece underneath it, and the honest boundaries of what this can and can't promise you. What's left is the practical version. Exactly how to start attaching movement to your own day this week, without needing a single ounce of extra motivation to do it. Here's how to actually start this week, and I want it to be genuinely small, because small is exactly the point. Pick one errand you already do, one, and attach movement to it instead of removing movement from it. Walk to get the coffee instead of driving. Take the stairs at work for one flight before switching to the elevator. Bike to the one appointment that's close enough. That's it. Not a new routine, not a schedule, not a habit tracker. Just one existing task, done with your body instead of around it. If you miss a week, that's not failure. And it's not a sign the system doesn't work for you. It just means life happened. The way it happens to every woman in Copenhagen too. The difference isn't that Nordic women never skip a week. It's that skipping a week doesn't unravel anything, because there was never a fragile streak to protect in the first place. You just pick the errand back up next week, the same way you'd pick up milk you forgot to buy. I want to leave you with the actual truth underneath everything we've covered today, because I think it's the part that matters most if you've spent years feeling like your energy quietly slipped away sometime after 35. It was never about willpower, and it was never about turning 40. It was about a system that asked your body to do a little bit, constantly, instead of asking your mind to find motivation for a lot, occasionally. One of those is sustainable for decades. The other burns out by March, every single year, no matter how strong your intentions were in January. You don't need a harder routine. You need a lighter one. One small piece of movement attached to a life you're already living, instead of one more program demanding energy you don't have to spare. Tell me in the comments, what's the one errand in your week you could realistically attach movement to starting tomorrow? I read every single comment, and I genuinely love to know what you land on. And if you know a woman who's exhausted from chasing motivation, instead of just building it into her day, send this to her. Sometimes the relief isn't a new plan. It's permission to stop making this so hard. I'm Freya, and I'll see you in the next one.